My name is Celia, and I'm 35 years old. I now run the HR department at a major tech company in Seattle, but my path here wasn't traditional. When I was 13, my mother looked me in the eyes and told me I wasn't really her child, just a burden she'd been forced to carry. Hours later, she left me at a shelter without looking back. 22 years later, life took a surprising turn when that same woman walked into my office, resume in hand, with no idea who I'd become. Before I tell you this story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button and stick around to see how I handled the woman who abandoned me. I grew up in what I thought was a normal family in Cleveland, Ohio. Our two-story house with blue shutters sat on a quiet suburban street, the kind with basketball hoops and driveways, and kids racing bikes until streetlights came on. My father, James, was an account manager for a manufacturing company, often traveling, but always bringing me small gifts from different cities. My mother, Sandra, worked part-time at a local bank. My older sister, Amy, was 5 years ahead of me, already concerned with popularity and boys, when I was still collecting rocks and climbing trees. Looking back now, I can see the signs that something wasn't right. But as a child, you accept your reality as normal. While Sandra doted on Amy, braiding her hair and shopping for matching outfits, her interactions with me were always tinged with something I couldn't name. Coldness, obligation. She'd cook my meals and wash my clothes, but the casual affection she showed Amy was conspicuously absent with me. Your mother just shows love differently to different people, my father would explain, when he found me crying after Sandra had declined to attend my school science fair, despite having gone to every one of Amy's dance recitals. He compensated by being extra attentive, taking me fishing on weekends and helping with science projects. I think he knew what I didn't. Our family traditions highlighted the disparity. Christmas mornings, Amy's pile of gifts always towered over mine. On birthdays, Amy got parties with friends and homemade cakes with candles. Mine were subdued affairs with store-bought desserts. Sandra would watch me open presents with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "Mum, watch this." I'd call out, trying to show her a cartwheel or a drawing desperate for approval. "Not now, I'm busy," was her usual response, though she never seemed too busy when Amy needed attention. I threw myself into school, bringing home perfect report cards and teacher commendations, laying them on the kitchen counter where Sandra would see them. "Good job," she'd say flatly, without the enthusiasm she showed for Amy's B+ efforts. When I was about 9, I started overhearing arguments between my parents. Their voices would carry through the heating vents to my bedroom upstairs. "We agreed never to talk about this," Sandra would hiss. "You promised me." "It's not fair to the child," my father would respond. "The truth will come out eventually." "I've done my part," Sandra would say. "Don't ask for more." I didn't understand these cryptic exchanges, but sensed they somehow involved me. Sandra's behavior grew more distant as I approached adolescence. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at me with an expression that looked almost like resentment. When I'd notice, she'd quickly look away. My father's business trips became longer and more frequent. The buffer between Sandra and me was disappearing. The atmosphere at home grew increasingly tense. Amy, now a teenager with her own social life, was rarely home, leaving me alone with Sandra's silent disapproval. Despite all this, I maintained a childish optimism that I could eventually win her over. I wrote her cards with heartfelt messages. I took on household chores without being asked. I tried to be perfect, thinking if I just found the right combination of behaviors, she would finally love me the way she loved Amy. "Why doesn't Mum like me?" I asked my father once when he was home between trips. "Your mother has complicated feelings," he said carefully. "It's not your fault, Celia. Never think it's your fault." But children always blame themselves. I examined my every characteristic, wondering which flaws made me unlovable to my own mother. Was I too loud, too quiet, too needy, not pretty enough? I spent hours in front of the mirror trying to see what she saw that made her keep her distance. As my 13th birthday approached, the tension in our home reached a breaking point. My father and Sandra had a shouting match behind their bedroom door. I couldn't make out the words, but the anger was palpable. The next morning, my father told me he had to leave for an emergency business trip. "I'll be back for your birthday, kiddo," he promised, hugging me tightly. "We'll do something special, just you and me." There was something in his eyes that scared me, a sadness I couldn't interpret. It was the last time I would see him for many years. The morning of my 13th birthday dawned with an unusual silence in the house. No happy birthday greeting, no special breakfast, no wrapped present waiting at my place at the table, Just Sandra, sitting with a cup of coffee, staring out the kitchen window as if she was gathering resolve. I poured myself a bowl of cereal, the clink of the spoon against the bowl thunderously loud in the silence. "Is everything okay?" I asked tentatively. Sandra turned to look at me, her expression unnervingly calm. "I've been waiting for your father to do this, but he's a coward. Always has been." My stomach tightened with apprehension. "Do what?" "Tell you the truth." She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes never leaving mine. "You're not my child, Celia. Not really." The spoon slipped from my fingers, clattering against the bowl. "What? Your father had an affair 13 years ago. You're the result." Her voice was clinical, detached. "I agreed to raise you because he threatened to leave if I didn't. But you're not my son. You're just his mistake that I've been forced to deal with." The world tilted sideways. My ears rang. This couldn't be happening. "That's not true," I whispered. Though somewhere deep inside pieces were clicking into place, explaining a lifetime of coldness. "Your birth mother didn't want you either," Sandra continued as if discussing the weather. "She was young, worked for your father. He paid her to keep quiet and give you up." Tears blurred my vision. "Dad wouldn't lie to me all this time. Your father lives in a fantasy world where everyone can be happy if we just pretend hard enough." She stood up, pushing her chair back. "But I'm done pretending. I never wanted to be a mother to another woman's child." I fled to my room, fumbling for the cordless phone to call my father. His number went straight to voicemail. I left a desperate, sobbing message begging him to call back. He never did. When I emerged hours later, red-eyed and shell-shocked, Sandra was in my room with 2 suitcases on my bed. "What are you doing?" I asked, voice hoarse from crying. "Pack what you need," she said, pulling clothes from my drawers and stuffing them haphazardly into one suitcase. "You're going to stay with relatives for a while." "What relatives? We don't have any family in Cleveland." Panic rose in my throat. "Don't argue with me," she snapped. "Just pack." I moved mechanically, selecting items in a daze. Photos of my father, a stuffed bear he'd given me, books, school supplies, things that represented normality. "Where's Dad? When is he coming home?" I kept asking. "He's not coming back," Sandra replied after the 5th time I asked. "He's accepted a position overseas. It was all arranged before he left." The betrayal cut even deeper. He'd known he was leaving for good when he hugged me goodbye. The car ride was silent, except for my occasional hiccuping sobs. I watched familiar neighborhoods give way to parts of the city I didn't recognize. We pulled up to a nondescript building with a small sign, East Side Youth Emergency Shelter. "This is a shelter," I said numbly as realization dawned. "You're leaving me at a shelter?" "I've already called them. They're expecting you." Sandra stared straight ahead, through the windshield, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Please don't do this," I begged. "I'll be better. I won't ask for anything. You won't even know I'm there." "I need to think about Amy now," she said. "This situation isn't healthy for either of us." "I'm your child too," I whispered. She turned to look at me, then her expression hardening. "No, you're not. You never were. And I'm done pretending." A staff member came out to the car. Sandra handed over a folder with my documents. "His father has abandoned the family," she told the woman without emotion. "I can't manage a troubled adolescent alone. Troubled I'd never been in trouble in my life." "You can't just leave me here," I said, voice rising in panic as the woman gently guided me from the car. Sandra didn't respond. She didn't hug me or say goodbye. She didn't even look back as she drove away, leaving me standing on the curb with my hastily packed suitcases and the shattered remains of everything I'd believed about my life. The intake process passed in a blur. Forms, questions, a small room with a twin bed, a shared bathroom, a plastic basket for my belongings. Everything smelled of industrial cleaner and sadness. That first night lying on a thin mattress under scratchy sheets, the full reality of my situation crashed over me. I wasn't who I thought I was. My mother wasn't my mother. My father had abandoned me. No one wanted me. No one was coming to take me home. I cried until there were no tears left, only hollow empty space where my heart used to be. The emergency youth shelter was meant to be temporary, a stopping point, before more permanent arrangements could be made. Those first few days I existed in a fog of shock and denial, convinced that my father would appear to rescue me, or that Sandra would return, saying it had all been a terrible mistake. I called our home number repeatedly until a staff member gently explained that Sandra had requested they block the calls. A social worker named Ms. Patterson sat with me in a small office with motivational posters on the walls explaining my situation. My father had indeed moved abroad, accepting a position in Singapore with no forwarding address provided. Sandra had signed temporary guardianship papers, citing inability to care for a child with whom she had no biological connection. The casual cruelty of those words on an official document still stings 2 decades later. What happens to me now? I asked, my voice small in the fluorescent-lit room. We'll find you a foster placement, Ms. Patterson explained. Sometimes these placements can become permanent through adoption. Sometimes they're temporary until family reconciliation is possible. But we both knew there would be no reconciliation. Sandra had made her choice with absolute finality. 2 weeks later, I was placed with the Thompsons, a middle-aged couple who had fostered dozens of children over the years. Their house was clean and well organized with clear rules and expectations. They weren't unkind, but they weren't parents either. They were caretakers, managing a rotating cast of damaged children. You can call me Mrs. Thompson, my foster mother said when I accidentally called her Mum out of habit. It's less confusing that way. School became a new battleground. I'd left my familiar classes and teachers behind, thrown into a different district mid-year. Word spread quickly that I was a foster kid, which made me an immediate target. What did you do that was so bad your parents didn't want you anymore? One boy taunted during lunch. My grades plummeted. I stopped raising my hand in class. I began to question everything about myself, including aspects I'd never considered before. If I wasn't who I thought I was, who was I? The identity crisis extended beyond my family situation to more fundamental questions about myself. It was during this time I began to explore feelings about gender that had always lingered beneath the surface. The sense of disconnection from my body intensified as I processed the traumatic revelation about my origins. Perhaps this was why Sandra had always held me at a distance, sensing something different in me that she couldn't articulate. After 6 months with the Thompsons, I was moved to a new placement when they decided to take a break from fostering. The Garcias were younger with 2 biological children and 1 other foster child. They tried harder to integrate me into their family, inviting me to movie nights and Sunday dinners. But by then I had built walls, afraid to trust or connect. 3 months later, Mrs. Garcia found my journal where I'd been processing my confusion about gender identity alongside the abandonment trauma. Their deeply religious household couldn't accommodate these questions, and I was moved again, this time to the Morrisons, an older couple whose children were grown. With each move, I lost a little more of myself. Clothes left behind, books forgotten, connections severed. I became expert at packing light and not getting attached. The one constant was school. Despite multiple transfers, education became my lifeline, the one area where effort reliably yielded results. In my sophomore year, I met Miss Martinez, an English teacher, who noticed something in me beyond the foster kid label. "You're a gifted writer, Celia," she told me after reading my essay about resilience. It was the first time anyone had used that name, the one I'd begun to think of as my true self. "Your voice matters. Your story matters." Ms. Martinez introduced me to journaling as a therapeutic practice, different from the secret diary the Garcias had discovered. She helped me apply for a specialized program for high-achieving students. She stayed after school to help me catch up on work I'd missed during placements changes. Most importantly, she believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. "The system is designed to process you, not nurture you," she said one afternoon as I confided my fears about the future. "You'll need to advocate for yourself. Keep your grades up. Start planning for college now." Therapy became another cornerstone of my survival. The state-provided sessions were brief and inconsistent therapists, changing almost as frequently as foster homes. But they provided space to process the dual traumas of abandonment and gender dysphoria. "What you're feeling is normal," one therapist assured me. "Many adolescents question their gender identity. Add to that the family disruption you've experienced, and it's natural to feel disconnected from yourself." Slowly, I rebuilt my sense of self from the ground up. If I wasn't Sandra's son or even James's son in any meaningful way, then who was I? The freedom in that question became my salvation. I could be whoever I needed to be. By senior year, I'd settled into my 4th foster home, achieved a 3.9 GPA despite the chaos, and begun quietly living as Celia among a small circle of trusted friends. Ms. Martinez helped me complete college applications and scholarship forms, explaining gaps in my education and home life in ways that highlighted my resilience rather than my victimhood. When the acceptance letter from State University arrived with a partial scholarship offer, I felt the first real hope since that fateful birthday morning. Ms. Martinez drove me to a small celebration dinner at a local restaurant. "You did this," she said, raising her water glass in a toast. "No one else. Remember that when things get tough." 2 months later, I aged out of the foster system, packing my few belongings into the same suitcases Sandra had hurriedly filled 5 years earlier. I had survived, but the journey to thriving was just beginning. College represented freedom and terror in equal measure. My partial scholarship covered tuition, but left housing, books, and living expenses unaddressed. I worked 3 jobs that first year, shelving books at the university library, waiting tables at an off-campus diner, and doing administrative work for the psychology department. I chose psychology as my major with a business minor. The human mind fascinated me, especially after watching my own resilience develop despite overwhelming odds. Business courses were practical, offering pathways to financial security I desperately craved after years of dependency on an unreliable system. My transition journey continued gradually. The university offered health services that included counseling and hormone therapy with sliding scale payments. I worked extra shifts to afford each step forward into my authentic identity, celebrating small victories like my first professionally tailored clothes and legal name change documents. "You seem lighter," my roommate Jasmine commented after I returned from court with my official name change certificate. "Like you're finally wearing clothes that fit after years of hand-me-downs." Jasmine became my first real friend since childhood. Unlike the conditional relationships of foster care, our friendship developed organically through late-night study sessions and shared packages of ramen noodles when money ran short at month's end. "Family is who shows up," Jasmine would say, having grown up with her own complicated parental dynamics. "Biology is just a starting point." Through Jasmine, I met her study group partners, Derek and Lewis, engineering students who accepted me without question or qualification. We formed a tight-knit circle, celebrating birthdays and holidays together when returning to our respective homes wasn't possible or desirable. Junior year, I secured an internship at a small HR consulting firm through a campus career fair. The position played to my strengths: empathy, careful observation, and deep understanding of how environments affect people. "You have unusual insight for someone your age," my supervisor remarked during my performance review. "You see dynamics others miss." For the first time, I recognized that my painful history had given me valuable perspective. I could walk into a workplace and immediately sense tension, hierarchy, and unspoken rules. I understood how institutional policies affected vulnerable individuals because I'd navigated those systems myself. After graduation, the firm offered me an entry-level position. My starting salary, though modest, represented more financial security than I'd ever known. I rented a tiny studio apartment, bought professional clothes at second-hand stores, and began building a life entirely of my own making. 3 years into my professional career, I met Diana, the head of HR at a mid-sized technology company. She'd come to my firm as a client and noticed my contributions during project meetings. "You're wasted in your current role," she told me bluntly over coffee. "I need someone with your perspective on my team." The offer she extended doubled my salary and expanded my responsibilities. Under Diana's mentorship, I learnt the business side of human resources, moving beyond compliance and paperwork to strategic planning and company culture development. "The best HR professionals understand human psychology and business objectives equally well," Diana advised. "You've got the first part naturally. I can teach you the second." My career accelerated from there. I earned certificates in conflict resolution and organizational development. I created training programs for managers on inclusive leadership. I developed policies that supported employees through life transitions, knowing firsthand how critical workplace stability can be when personal lives implode. 7 years after joining Diana's team, I was recruited by a growing tech company in Seattle as their Director of Human Resources. At 32, I had achieved a level of success that seemed impossible during those dark days in the youth shelter. My office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound. I led a team of 15 HR professionals. My signature approved policies affecting thousands of employees. Seattle offered new beginnings in my personal life as well. I found a beautiful apartment in a secure building with a doorman addressing the lingering safety concerns that followed me from childhood. I built a chosen family of close friends who knew my story and loved me because of it, not despite it. Romance proved more challenging. Trust issues from my childhood complicated intimate relationships. I dated occasionally, but maintained careful emotional boundaries, afraid of the vulnerability real love requires. "Not everyone leaves," my therapist gently reminded me during our bi-weekly sessions. I'd continued therapy throughout adulthood, recognizing it as essential maintenance for my mental health. I know that logically, I'd respond, "Convincing my heart is another matter." Every few years, I would attempt to find information about my biological parents. These searches always hit dead ends. My birth certificate listed James as my father, but left the mother's name blank. Sandra's cruel revelation about a young woman working for my father provided few concrete details to pursue. The question of why they had all rejected me lingered, though its power diminished with time. I had built a meaningful life without them. Their absence was their loss, not mine, though on difficult days the abandoned 13-year-old within me still wept for answers. I developed a personal philosophy about resilience and chosen family that I shared with new hires during orientation. Our company isn't just an employer, I would tell them. We're a community where you belong based on your contributions and character, not circumstance or background. It was the environment I had always needed and now had the power to create for others. The abandoned child had become an architect of belonging. Monday mornings always brought a flood of emails and meeting requests after the weekend pause. This particular Monday seemed routine as I reviewed applications for a senior benefits specialist position my team needed to fill quickly. The name on the 7th resume stopped my scrolling finger, Sandra Wilson. My first thought was coincidence. Sandra wasn't an uncommon name, but as I scanned the employment history showing previous positions in Cleveland banking, then a progression through financial services roles, ice spread through my veins. The Sandra Wilson seeking employment at my company was the woman who had abandoned me at 13. The photo attached to the application confirmed it. 22 years, had added lines around her eyes and grey at her temples, but the tight-lipped smile was hauntingly familiar. It was the same expression she'd worn while watching me open birthday presents she resented giving. My hands shook as I set my coffee mug down too hard, liquid sloshing onto important documents. My assistant Madison rushed in at the sound. "Everything okay, Celia?" "Fine," I managed, though nothing was fine. "Just clumsy this morning." After Madison left, I locked my office door and sat breathing deliberately, fighting the panic rising from my chest into my throat. Why was Sandra in Seattle? How had she found my company? Did she know I worked here? The application answered some questions. Her most recent position had been eliminated in corporate restructuring. She'd relocated to Seattle 3 months ago. Her application letter mentioned our company's reputation for excellent employee benefits, particularly health insurance coverage, without indicating any knowledge of my connection. The rush of emotions was overwhelming. 13-year-old Celia wanted to hide under the desk. Adult Celia considered delegating the interview to someone else or simply rejecting the application outright. Director of Human Resources. Celia recognized both options as professionally and personally problematic. I called my therapist during her emergency hours, something I hadn't done in years. "This is an extraordinary situation," Dr. Levine acknowledged after I explained. "What's your instinct?" "To face her," I admitted. "To let her see what became of the child she discarded." "That's valid," Dr. Levine said. "But consider your boundaries carefully. Workplace interactions have different rules than personal ones." We developed a plan. I would conduct the initial interview personally, with Madison present, for both professional propriety and emotional support. I would maintain my professional role without revealing our connection unless Sandra recognized me. I would evaluate her qualifications objectively, neither punishing nor rewarding her based on our history. The interview was scheduled for Wednesday morning. I spent Tuesday alternating between anxiety and a strange calm resolve. I chose my most professional outfit, a tailored charcoal suit that projected authority. I reviewed Sandra's resume repeatedly, preparing technical questions about benefits administration that would keep the conversation firmly in professional territory. Wednesday arrived with crystalline clarity. I felt oddly detached, as if watching myself from a distance as I greeted Madison and reviewed the interview structure. "I'll take notes," Madison said. "You seemed stressed about this one yesterday. If she only knew." At precisely 10:00 a.m., Madison escorted Sandra Wilson into my office. She looked smaller than I remembered, more vulnerable somehow in her navy interview suit and sensible pumps. She carried an expensive-looking leather portfolio that couldn't quite hide the tremor in her hands. She was nervous. "Good. Miss Wilson, thank you for coming in today," I said, standing to greet her with the practiced smile I'd perfected over years of professional interactions. "I'm Celia Jenkins, Director of Human Resources." "Thank you for the opportunity," she replied, taking the seat I indicated across from my desk. She didn't recognize me immediately. Why would she? The child she'd abandoned had been a confused adolescent boy in her mind. The confident woman across the desk bore little resemblance to that broken child. I proceeded with standard questions about her experience and qualifications. She had solid credentials in benefits administration and spoke knowledgeably about regulatory compliance. Madison took notes while I maintained unwavering eye contact with Sandra, waiting for the moment of recognition. It came when I asked about her relocation to Seattle. "It's been a significant adjustment," she said. "After my divorce 5 years ago, I thought staying in Cleveland made sense, but when the bank downsized, there were limited opportunities locally. My daughter Amy suggested Seattle since she's considering moving her family here next year, and I thought having a fresh start might be—" She trailed off, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied my face. "I'm sorry," she said. "You look familiar somehow." I maintained my professional demeanor. I've been with this company for 3 years. Perhaps we've crossed paths at an industry event." Sandra shook her head slowly, the color draining from her face as puzzle pieces clicked into place. "Celia," she whispered, "but that's not possible." "Ms. Wilson, are you feeling all right?" I asked, signaling Madison with my eyes. "Would you like some water?" Madison, sensing something significant, but not understanding, quickly fetched a water bottle from the small refrigerator in the corner. Sandra accepted it with trembling hands, her eyes never leaving my face. "It is you," she said. "But how? I'm the Director of Human Resources interviewing you for a benefits specialist position," I stated calmly. "Shall we continue with the interview, or would you prefer to reschedule?" The shock on her face was almost worth 22 years of pain. Almost. Sandra took a gulp of water, visibly trying to regain composure. "Continue, please." I resumed my questioning professional mask firmly in place, while Sandra struggled to focus. Her answers became scattered, her expertise overshadowed by the revelation sitting across from her. "Your technical qualifications are solid," I concluded as the interview ended. "We'll be conducting several interviews for this position over the next week. Human Resources will be in touch about next steps." "Celia," she said desperately as Madison moved to escort her out. "Could we talk privately, just for a moment?" "I'm afraid I have another appointment," I replied. "Thank you for coming in today, Miss Wilson." After she left, I locked my office door again and collapsed into my chair, the professional veneer crumbling as I sobbed silently into my hands. Madison knocked gently a few minutes later. "That was intense," she said, when I let her in, pretending not to notice my red eyes. "What happened in there?" "Long story, I managed. Thank you for your support." That night, I stood in my beautiful apartment overlooking the water, the life I'd built, through determination and resilience surrounding me in tasteful furniture and carefully chosen art. The lost broken child I'd been seemed impossibly distant, yet Sandra's appearance had summoned her instantly back to the surface. "You survived," I whispered to my reflection in the window glass. "You thrived." But the victory felt hollow without resolution. After all these years, Sandra had unwittingly walked right into my carefully constructed world. The universe had handed me something I'd never expected: power in a relationship where I'd once been powerless. What would I do with it? I expected the follow-up process to proceed through normal channels, giving me time to process the shock and decide on next steps. Sandra Wilson had other plans. The next morning, Madison buzzed my office intercom. "Ms. Wilson is in the lobby asking to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." My pulse quickened. "Have security escort her to the small conference room. Tell her I'll be available in 15 minutes. Those 15 minutes were spent in careful preparation, both mental and physical. I touched up my makeup, straightened my already immaculate outfit, and called Dr. Levine for a quick grounding session. "Remember, you're in control of this interaction," Dr. Levine reminded me. "You can end it at any time." The small conference room offered privacy with transparency, its glass walls visible from the main office area, where Madison could monitor the situation. Sandra sat rigidly in a visitor chair, her portfolio clutched like a shield. "Ms. Wilson," I greeted her coolly, closing the door behind me. "This is irregular. Interview follow-ups are typically conducted by phone." "I couldn't wait," she said, her voice unsteady. "When I realized who you were yesterday, I nearly collapsed in the parking garage." I sat across from her, maintaining professional distance. "What can I help you with today?" "It's really you," she whispered. "Celia, though that wasn't your name then." "It's my name now," I replied firmly. You've changed so much." 22 years will do that." My tone remained neutral, despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. I need to explain, Sandra began, leaning forward. What happened back then, it wasn't what you think. What I think, I said carefully, is that on my 13th birthday you told me I wasn't your child, packed my belongings and left me at a homeless shelter. Those are facts, not interpretations. Sandra flinched. Your father forced my hand. He was controlling, manipulative. You don't know what that marriage was like. You're right, I don't, I acknowledged. Because after you abandoned me, I never saw either of you again. James was abusive, Sandra insisted. Not physically, but emotionally. He used you as a weapon against me for years, threatening to take Amy and leave if I didn't raise you as my own. I studied her face, searching for truth in her justifications. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've carried the guilt for years, she said, tears welling. When I saw you yesterday, I realized I might finally have a chance to make things right. Make things right, I repeated flatly. After 22 years. I know it sounds impossible, she admitted. But when James finally left anyway, taking all our savings and leaving me alone with Amy to raise, I realized the terrible mistake I'd made. A mistake? I echoed the word, triggering memories of her cruel dismissal. Just his mistake. I was angry at James, not you, Sandra continued. But I couldn't separate the two in my mind. When he abandoned us after his business failed, leaving nothing but debts and broken promises, something in me snapped. I'd sacrificed so much to keep our family together, and he left anyway. Her revelation that James had ultimately abandoned her, too, provided cold comfort. What do you want from me, Sandra? She seemed startled by my use of her first name, a small assertion of my adult status. The truth, she said. I want you to know what really happened. I'm listening, I said. Though a part of me wondered if any explanation could possibly justify her actions. Sandra detailed a marriage built on manipulation and control. James, handsome and charismatic, had swept her off her feet, then gradually isolated her from friends and family. When she discovered his affair with a young administrative assistant, he'd threatened divorce unless Sandra agreed to raise the resulting child, me, as their own. He said I'd get nothing in the divorce, Sandra explained. That he'd make sure I lost Amy too. I was terrified and trapped. So you agreed to raise a child you resented, I summarized. I tried not to resent you, she said weakly. But every time I looked at you, I saw his betrayal. It wasn't fair to you. No, I agreed. It wasn't. Why didn't you place me for adoption? I asked the question that had haunted me for years. Or with family members. Why a shelter? Sandra looked down, shame evident in her posture. I wanted to hurt James by rejecting you. I knew how much he cared for you, even if it was just out of guilt. When he left us for that overseas job, abandoning the child he'd forced me to raise, I snapped. The casual cruelty of using a child as a weapon in adult conflicts left me momentarily speechless. Did you ever try to find out what happened to me? I finally asked. At first, no, she admitted. I was too angry. By the time the anger faded, enough for regret to set in, years had passed. The social worker wouldn't give me any information. She said you were an adult by then, and I'd surrendered my rights. Sandra reached for my hand across the table. I pulled back instinctively. I understand why you hate me, she said, but I've changed. The woman who did that terrible thing doesn't exist anymore. That's a convenient narrative, I replied. People don't change fundamentally. They just find better justifications for who they've always been. That's not fair, Sandra protested. No, it isn't, I agreed. Neither was abandoning a 13-year-old child because you were angry at your husband. The conversation shifted when Sandra abruptly mentioned the job again. I really need this position, she said. My health insurance expires next month and I have a condition requiring regular medication. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost laughable. First the apology, then the sob story, now the request. The same Sandra who'd calculated how to hurt my father most effectively was calculating how to use our connection to secure employment. Our hiring decisions are based on qualifications and fit, I replied evenly, not personal connections. But surely you could put in a good word, she pressed. After everything that happened, don't you think you owe me at least that much? The audacity stunned me. I owe you. That came out wrong, she backtracked quickly. I just meant this could be a chance for both of us to move forward. Amy would love to reconnect with you too. She has children now, your nieces and nephews. The mention of family I'd never known tugged at something deep within me, but I recognized the manipulation tactic. Sandra, I said firmly. I spent years in therapy learning to trust again after what you did. Every relationship I've ever had has been shaped by the abandonment issues you created. I don't owe you anything. I was wrong, she admitted, tears falling freely now. Terribly wrong. Not a day goes by that I don't regret it. And yet you waited for random chance to bring us together, I observed. You didn't actively seek me out to make amends. I was afraid, she whispered. Afraid you wouldn't forgive me. Afraid of facing what I'd done. I stood signaling the end of our conversation. I need you to leave now. I have actual work responsibilities to attend to. Please, Sandra said desperately. At least consider giving me another chance. For Amy's sake, if not mine. She misses her sibling. Amy had 22 years to find me, I pointed out. The internet exists. Social media exists. If finding me was a priority, it would have happened. As security prepared to escort her out, Sandra played her final card. You turned out so well despite everything. That must count for something. I turned out well because of everything, not despite it, I corrected her. Your abandonment taught me self-reliance. The foster system taught me to advocate fiercely for myself and others. Your rejection forced me to build my own definition of family based on love and choice rather than obligation or biology. In the elevator lobby, Sandra made one last plea. Will you at least think about it? About giving us a second chance? I'll think about it, I conceded. But don't contact me again. If I have something to say, I'll reach out through official company channels. After she left, I called my friend Taylor, one of the few people who knew my full history. We met for dinner at a quiet restaurant where I could speak freely. She shows up out of nowhere, apologizes, then immediately asks for a job, Taylor summarized incredulously. The audacity is almost impressive. What would you do? I asked, pushing pasta around my plate without eating. Taylor considered carefully. I'd remember that you're not just Celia the abandoned child anymore. You're Celia the HR director with professional ethics to uphold, and Celia the whole person who deserves closure on her terms, not Sandra's. The dual responsibilities weighed heavily. My personal history with Sandra created a clear conflict of interest in the hiring process. Yet simply recusing myself felt like running away from an opportunity the universe had mysteriously provided. Whatever you decide, Taylor said, squeezing my hand. Remember, you're making the choice from a position of strength, not vulnerability. That 13-year-old had no power. You do. That night, I sat on my balcony watching fairy lights cross the dark water, contemplating the strange symmetry of the situation. Sandra had once held my fate in her hands and chosen rejection. Now I held a measure of influence over her future and faced my own choice about rejection or compassion. The decision wasn't just professional, it was existential. Who did I want to be in this story, the righteous avenger, the magnanimous victor, or something more nuanced than either role allowed? The weekend provided necessary distance from the emotional intensity of Sandra's unexpected appearance. I hiked Mount Rainier trails on Saturday, the physical exertion, clearing mental fog, and spent Sunday in consultation with both Dr. Levine and my professional mentor Diana, who had since retired to Bainbridge Island. The conflict of interest is clear, Diana advised over brunch at her waterfront home. You can't be directly involved in hiring a family member, even an estranged one. She's not family, I insisted automatically. Diana raised an eyebrow. Biology and history make her family in the eyes of employment law, whether you claim the relationship or not. Dr. Levine focused on the personal dimension during our emergency session. This is an opportunity for resolution on your terms, she noted. But resolution doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation. By Monday morning, I had formulated a plan that honored both professional ethics and personal boundaries. I requested a meeting with our CEO, explaining the extraordinary situation without unnecessary emotional details. I need to recuse myself from this hiring decision, I explained, but I have an alternative proposal that maintains both company integrity and potential value. My solution involved our partner organization, a non-profit focused on workforce development that our company supported financially. They needed an experienced benefits administrator for a 1-year contract position. The role offered health insurance, but required participation in their counseling program originally designed for individuals re-entering the workforce after incarceration or addiction, but applicable to anyone needing support through life transitions. The CEO approved my plan, impressed by the creative solution to an unusual problem. This is why we value you, Celia. You find the path that serves everyone's best interests, even in complex situations. I scheduled a meeting with Sandra at a neutral location, a quiet cafe equidistant from our respective addresses according to her application information. She arrived early, clearly eager hope, visible in her nervous adjustments to her scarf and hair. "Thank you for meeting me," she began as I sat down across from her. "I've been thinking about everything you said." "I've been doing a lot of thinking too," I replied, "about what's possible and what isn't between us." Her expression faltered slightly at my tone. "First, I need to be clear that I've recused myself from the hiring decision for the position you applied for," I explained. "My personal history with you creates a conflict of interest that would compromise the process for all candidates." "I understand," Sandra said, disappointment evident despite her attempt to hide it. "However," I continued, "I've identified an alternative opportunity that might meet your needs while respecting necessary boundaries." I outlined the position at the partner organization, explaining both the benefits and the requirements. "Mandatory counseling?" Sandra questioned, frowning. "It's a condition of the placement," I confirmed. "The program is designed for people rebuilding their lives after significant disruption. The counseling component has proven essential to successful transitions. And if I refuse the counseling, then the position wouldn't be suitable for you," I replied simply. "This is the option I'm able to offer." Sandra studied me with new awareness. "This is about more than a job, isn't it?" "Yes," I acknowledged. "It's about accountability and growth. If you're sincere about making amends, this path offers structure for that process. And us, our relationship. That depends entirely on what happens during that year," I said carefully. "I'm willing to consider limited contact under specific conditions." I outlined my terms. Initial contact would be restricted to monthly updates through email. After 6 months of consistent counseling, we could progress to occasional supervised meetings if her therapist and mine both agreed it was constructive. Any attempt to leverage our connection for additional benefits would terminate the arrangement immediately. "What about Amy?" Sandra asked. "She really does want to reconnect." The mention of my half-sister stirred complicated emotions. "Amy can contact me directly if she wishes. My conditions with her would be different." "She'll be relieved," Sandra said. "She's felt guilty all these years, though she was just a teenager when everything happened." I presented Sandra with printed information about the position and my contact parameters. "Take some time to consider whether this works for you. The choice is yours." "Just like the choice was yours all those years ago when you left me at that shelter," Sandra observed softly. "No," I corrected her. "I'm offering you an opportunity with clear terms and support systems. You offered me abandonment with no preparation or safety net. The situations aren't comparable." As our meeting concluded, Sandra asked one final question that caught me off guard. "Are you happy, Celia? Despite everything, did you find happiness?" The question deserved honest reflection. "I found purpose," I answered carefully. "I found meaningful work and genuine connections with chosen family. I created security for myself when none was provided. Happiness comes and goes, but those foundations remain constant." Sandra nodded slowly. "You became someone remarkable. I wish I could take credit, but I know better. People rise or fall based on their own character and the support systems around them," I replied. "I was fortunate to find people who believed in me when my original family didn't." 3 days later, Sandra emailed accepting the position and its conditions. The path forward was uncertain, but for the first time in 22 years it existed. 2 weeks after that, I received an email from Amy, tentative and apologetic. We arranged to meet for coffee, both nervous about bridging the decades-long gap. The woman who approached my table at Starbucks had Sandra's eyes, but a warmer smile. She clutched her purse strap nervously as she approached. "I wouldn't have recognized you," she said, studying me with wonder. "But I'd know those dimples anywhere. You still smile the same way." The meeting was awkward, but not hostile. Amy had been away at college when Sandra left me at the shelter, returning home to find me gone, and Sandra's explanation vague and suspicious. "I knew something terrible had happened, but Mom shut down completely when I asked questions," Amy explained. "By the time I pieced together enough to start looking for you, years had passed, and your name had changed." She showed me pictures of her children on her phone, a boy and a girl who technically shared my bloodline, though we were strangers. "They'd love to meet their aunt someday when you're ready." The word aunt felt foreign, a role I'd never imagined holding. But as Amy talked about her children's personalities and interests, I found myself curious about these young people who carried fragments of my DNA. That first dinner led to others' cautious steps toward a relationship that had no roadmap. Amy and I built a fragile bridge across the chasm of our separated childhoods, finding common ground in shared memories of our father and similar mannerisms we'd both inherited. Sandra's progress was slower, more complicated. Her monthly email updates showed reluctant engagement with therapy initially, then gradual insights as the process continued. At the 6-month mark, both our therapists agreed a supervised meeting might be constructive. We met in Dr. Levine's office, neutral territory, with professional support. Sandra seemed smaller, somehow humbled by the counselling process that had forced her to confront the full impact of her actions. "I never allowed myself to see it from your perspective before," she admitted. "I was so wrapped up in my own pain that I couldn't recognise yours." The acknowledgement wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A starting point. Our story inspired me professionally as well. I developed a mentorship program for foster youth transitioning to adulthood, leveraging our company's resources and employee volunteer hours to provide guidance with college applications, interview skills, and professional networking. When the program received an industry award for inclusive workplace initiatives, I gave an acceptance speech about breaking cycles of trauma without mentioning my personal connection to the cause. Sandra sat in the audience, our relationship still too fragile and complex to acknowledge publicly. But as our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, something passed between us. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. We had both survived our broken past and found ways to move forward carrying our scars, but not defined by them. The abandoned 13-year-old within me would always exist, that wound never completely healed. But the adult I'd become had found power in choosing compassion without compromising boundaries, in offering opportunities for redemption without guaranteeing outcomes. I realized that true power wasn't found in revenge or even justice, but in breaking cycles of hurt rather than perpetuating them. Sandra's actions had reflected her own trauma and limitations. Understanding this didn't excuse what she'd done, but it allowed me to see her as a flawed human rather than the monster of my childhood memories. The greatest revelation was recognizing that forgiveness wasn't something I offered Sandra. It was something I gave myself permission to stop carrying the weight of abandonment as my defining story. Life had indeed turned tables in ways I never could have imagined that tearful day at the shelter. But the most important turn wasn't finding Sandra in my office or holding power over her fate. It was discovering that I had become someone who could face the source of my deepest wounds without being diminished by the encounter. We don't get to write the beginnings of our stories. Those pages are filled by circumstances and choices beyond our control. But we hold the pen for every chapter that follows, deciding which characters remain, which themes develop, and most importantly, how we choose to interpret the plot twists that blindside us. Have you ever had a moment when life came full circle, offering an unexpected chance for closure with someone who hurt you? What did you do with that opportunity? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this resonated with you. Remember, sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest sources of wisdom and compassion when we're brave enough to face them on our own terms. Thank you for listening.